I'm going to be breaking down this dresser makeover into a couple of videos because I have so much information that I want to share with you. I'll be starting off with a rub-on decor transfer, and then later on I'll be layering up some really fun products. I'll share with you all of my tips and techniques along the way, so make sure you watch all the way to the end of the video so you don't miss a thing. Hey, I'm Deanna. Thanks for joining me for this furniture makeover. I've done a little prep work to get the dresser to this stage. It was pretty dirty and beat up when I first got it, so I cleaned it up and sanded off the existing finish. Then I vacuumed up the sanding dust and wiped it down with a damp cloth, and that brings us to this stage here. There's still a few bits of stain here and there and a few scratches and dents, but I'm really loving how that looks. I think it adds a lot of character and age to the piece, and I'm going to leave the imperfections just as they are. Here's the decor transfer I've chosen for this dresser. This pattern is called Sweet Dreaming, and it's made by Redesign with Prima. As one of their content creators, I get to test out all kinds of fun products and then share with you my tips and feedback. So big thanks to Redesign with Prima for sending me this transfer to use. Now let's get started with my first tip, which is when applying a decor transfer to raw wood, seal the wood first. Now, even though I've sanded and cleaned this dresser, the wood is still dry, maybe even a little bit dusty feeling. And what that means is some areas of the transfer might not adhere properly. Now that's okay if you're going for more of a rustic look where some little bits here and there might be broken up, but I'd like to try and get as smooth of a transfer, as solid of a transfer as I can. So I am going to seal this wood here to start. Now before I dip into my sealer, I'm going to wipe everything down once with this tack cloth. Now it's not so sticky that's going to leave a residue on the surface, but just sticky enough that it's going to pick up any fine little bits of dust that are left behind. I've chosen General Finishes Flat Out Flat for my sealer. I selected this one because it's one I've used before over top of raw wood, paint, and stain, and I really like how it comes out. A nice flat, matte look to it. It's really easy to work with. It dries pretty quick because it is water-based, and that also means that cleanup is pretty easy too. You want to give your top coats a good stir before you get started. I always like to stir the top coat rather than shaking because shaking can create some little air bubbles, and sometimes those will pop and leave little circle marks on the surface. I like to pour my sealer into a container rather than dipping my brush right into the can. Just in case my brush gets a little bit dusty or dirty, I don't want to contaminate the contents of the container. Brush the product on with nice long linear strokes with the wood grain. You can go back and forth a couple of times, but don't overwork the product. Just do one section and then move on to the next. Slightly overlap the wet edge on your next stroke. General Finishes recommends applying this sealer with a foam brush or paint pad applicator, and I've used both before and they do come out really nice and smooth and even. On this project, I'm just using a synthetic bristle brush, which I find also works really well. You can test out a few things and see what you like. This just needs to sit and dry now before I can move on to the next step. Because it's raw wood, it's actually drying quite quickly, but I'm going to give it a couple of hours before I recoat. Once I've done the second coat, I'll let it sit overnight, and then I'll come back and we'll start on that transfer. Now it's time for the transfer. In the tube, you'll find the transfer, which usually comes on a couple of sheets. An instruction sheet, and a wooden stick. Let's take a closer look at one of these transfer sheets. The colorful pattern you see here is the actual transfer, and the white is a protective backing sheet. It's important you keep this backing sheet in place until you're ready to adhere the transfer to your surface. The back of the transfer is sticky, and you want to be careful not to get any oils from your fingers or dirt on this surface. Whatever color your surface is will show in behind the transfer. So here we're seeing white from that backing sheet. When I apply it to the dresser, you're going to see this raw wood color showing through. There's also a smart grid on here with some lines and measurements that will help you align your transfer straight on your surface. I've decided that I want the transfer to be centered on the drawers. So to start, I'll just mark a center line on the dresser front. And now I'll find the center on my transfer and then I'll line the two up. I'm also going to hang the bottom sheet just to dry fit and make sure everything fits and is nice and even. This is looking really good to me, so I'm going to go ahead with this placement. Before I get started, I just wanted to point out that the design is a little bit shorter than the width of my dresser. I could save this transfer for another piece that's a little bit more narrow, but I think it's going to look really great on the wood, so I'm just going to go for it. Once the transfer is on, I can see how it looks. I might need to get a little bit creative filling in that space, but we'll worry about that later. Remember, the back of this transfer is sticky, so once I press it down, I can't move it. So just go slow and take your time to line it up. I've got my markers here to sort of eyeball it into place, and I'm going to line up the top edge of this transfer with the top edge of the drawer. Now that I have it lined up, I'll just use my hand to rub it into place. I'll just continue to rub right up to the bottom of this drawer. The dresser kind of dips in here, so I'll deal with that in a moment. We'll just get this nice flat part stuck down. And then I've got some painter's tape here again. I'm just going to tack it into place just to make sure it doesn't slip. To transfer the design, it's really easy. You just take this wooden stick that comes in the tube and just start at one side and rub the stick over the image. And the image will release from the acetate sheet and stick to your surface. You can see when the image transfers, it's no longer attached to this sheet. I kind of just like to hold the edge of the sheet, sort of pull it along as I'm rubbing the transfer. This is a bit of a tedious process, so just take your time. I recently got this transfer tool from Redesign with Prima. I haven't used it yet. So far, every transfer I've ever done, I've just used the wooden stick that comes in the box and it works well. But I was curious to see if using something like this would make it go a little easier or faster. So I'm going to use this tool now to finish applying the transfer, and then I'll let you know after what I think. I will leave links in the description box below to all of the products I mentioned in this video, so you can easily find them if you'd like to try them out for yourself. To make it easier to work around these carvings in the dresser, I'm just going to take a utility knife and cut right along this crease. I'll start with some painter's tape and tack this lower section into place so it doesn't fall onto the floor. I haven't fully pressed this bottom section down with my hand yet. And then I'll take my knife and just run it along right here at the bottom of the drawer. I'm just going to start by transferring everything onto the edge of this detail and then onto the drawer. Now that I have everything transferred onto this little ledge here, I'm going to smooth the transfer down onto the door and then rub that into place. So right here behind the design, there is a metal keyhole. So I'm hoping I can just kind of pull the acetate sheet away and the transfer will lay over top of the metal. I've done something similar before, so let's give it a try and see if that works. Oh, that's awesome. That worked out really well. Now I might distress this a little bit later. I'm not exactly sure. So I'm just going to leave it like this for now and carry on with pressing down the rest of the transfer. If you start to pull your transfer and little pieces are stuck onto the acetate sheet, just go ahead and push it back into place and then rub that spot again. And then you're good to go. I'm really loving how this looks. I think it's such a cool design. So I'm ready to move on to the next piece, which is a continuation of the top half. The process will be basically the same. I'll remove the white backing sheet, line up the transfers right where they meet, and then use some painter's tape to tack it in place, and then start to rub this one on as well. And just like the top half, I'm going to work in sections, so I'll go right up to the edge of the drawer, I'll cut it with my knife, do this strip here, and then finish by doing the bottom piece on the bottom drawer. Each furniture piece you apply a decor transfer to will have its own unique set of challenges. Drawers might be a little bit lopsided, things might not line up perfectly, ornate details kind of getting in the way, but don't let this stop you from giving it a try. Just take it slow and go one step at a time. You can also get transfers that are individual elements, which makes it a little bit easier than a continuous pattern like this, simply because you can cut out the elements and place them wherever you like without any worry about things being straight or even. Try not to sweat the small stuff, avoid perfectionism, and just have fun and enjoy the process. So before we move on to the next step, let's talk about transfer tool versus wooden stick. Overall, I did find that this made things a little bit easier, mostly because of the sturdiness of this transfer tool compared to the wooden stick. Many times before, I've snapped one of these sticks in half just from pressing really hard. So I think it's an advantage to have a little bit of a sturdier tool so it doesn't break partway through the project. Also, the wider edge did make it easier to get a larger area done a little bit quicker. And I did notice as I was going this kind of little hooked edge, which I found really helpful getting right into the cracks. I could use that tool to kind of smush it in there. So overall, I did like working with this. Now, the result wasn't any better with this than with the wooden stick. Yes, it made things a little bit easier for me, but I'd say if you're only going to be doing 1 or 2 transfers ever, you can just use the wooden stick that comes in the package. If you plan on doing a ton of furniture pieces with transfers, this tool might be something that you want to pick up. Now that the transfer is on, I'm really liking how it looks. I'm just going to use a little bit of sandpaper to sort of distress the edges just a little bit, as well as do a little bit of work on these keyholes that got completely covered. Now that the transfer is on, you can easily see that space I was talking about before where the design stops before the edge of the drawer. I could just leave it as it is, but I think I want to do something to fill in that space. Let me know in the comments below, what would you do? Would you just leave it as it is, or would you try and blend that hard line a little bit more? My first couple of thoughts are just taking some paint and extending the pattern just a little bit to the edge of the drawer. I could distress it to wear this edge so it's not so hard and obvious, or maybe layer some stencils or other products over top. Again, let me know in the comments below, what would you do if this was your dresser? Now, if you're enjoying this dresser makeover so far, click the thumbs up. And if you'd like to be alerted when I upload part 2, remember to click the subscribe button and the notification bell, because that's how you'll be alerted when I do upload the next video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you back here for part 2.